If you've owned an iPhone in the past decade, you probably remember that small, reversible cable that always seemed to survive longer than your headphones, your charger, and sometimes even your phone itself. The Lightning connector wasn't just a cable, it became part of Apple's identity. But suddenly, it started disappearing. So what exactly happened to Apple's Lightning connector, and why did one of the most recognizable tech accessories in the world get replaced? To understand its downfall, we need to go back to where it all began, right here, on History of Simple Things. The Lightning connector was introduced by Apple in 2012 alongside the iPhone 5. It replaced the bulky 30-pin dock connector that Apple had used for nearly a decade. At the time, Lightning felt like a major upgrade. It was smaller, faster, and most importantly, reversible, meaning you could plug it in either way without fumbling in the dark. This might sound basic today, but back then reversible connectors were still rare. Lightning quickly became the standard for iPhones, iPads, AirPods cases, and a wide range of Apple accessories. It wasn't just a cable, it was an ecosystem, and Apple made sure of that through its Made for iPhone licensing program, which controlled third-party accessory makers and ensured compatibility. When Lightning launched, it solved several real problems. USB standards at the time were still evolving, and the widely used USB-A connector was not reversible and felt outdated compared to Apple's sleek design philosophy. Lightning also gave Apple full control over performance and accessory compatibility. Unlike open standards, Lightning used a proprietary chip that helped regulate data and charging functions. This allowed Apple to maintain quality control, but also meant that third-party manufacturers had to pay licensing fees. For years, this system worked well. Lightning became deeply embedded in Apple's product lineup, and millions of users built their charging habits around it. But technology doesn't stay still. While Lightning was thriving inside the Apple ecosystem, the rest of the tech world was moving toward USB-C. This newer standard was faster, more powerful, and more universal. One cable could charge laptops, tablets, phones, and even some gaming devices. USB-C also supported higher data transfer speeds and faster charging capabilities than Lightning, which gradually started to feel limited in comparison. At the same time, regulators, especially in the European Union, began pushing for a universal charging standard to reduce electronic waste and inconvenience for consumers. The EU formally adopted legislation requiring most portable electronics to use USB-C by 2024. That decision placed direct pressure on Apple, which had been one of the last major companies still relying on a proprietary charging port for its smartphones. Interestingly, Apple didn't wait for the iPhone to make the first move. The transition actually started with the iPad Pro in 2018, which switched to USB-C. Later, MacBooks fully adopted USB-C ports as well, replacing almost every legacy connector, including MagSafe at the time. This created an unusual situation. Apple laptops and tablets were already using USB-C, while the iPhone remained stuck on Lightning. That inconsistency became harder to justify over time, especially as users increasingly relied on multiple Apple devices together. By the early 2020s, the gap between Lightning and USB-C had become impossible to ignore. The real turning point came in 2023 with the release of the iPhone 15 lineup. For the first time since 2012, Apple replaced the Lightning port with USB-C. This wasn't just a cosmetic change, it was a major shift in Apple's hardware ecosystem. The iPhone finally aligned with MacBooks and iPads, allowing users to share a single cable across nearly all their devices. With this change, Lightning effectively entered its final phase. Apple gradually stopped producing Lightning-based iPhones, though existing models and accessories remained in circulation. However, new accessory development has largely shifted toward USB-C and wireless solutions. Even though Lightning is no longer the future of Apple devices, it hasn't disappeared overnight. Millions of Lightning cables, headphones, and accessories are still in use worldwide. Apple continues to support older devices for years, meaning Lightning will remain relevant in the short term. However, the direction is clear. The ecosystem is shifting toward USB-C and increasingly toward wireless charging technologies like MagSafe. Over time, Lightning will likely fade into legacy status, remembered as one of Apple's most recognizable but ultimately transitional technologies. There's also a broader impact. Accessory makers are now redesigning entire product lines, and consumers are slowly replacing older cables and docks. It marks the end of a long chapter in Apple's design history. The story of the Lightning connector isn't just about a cable. It's about how technology evolves and how even the most successful designs eventually reach their limits. Lightning served Apple well for over a decade, defining an era of sleek, controlled, and tightly integrated hardware. But as global standards shifted and user needs changed, even Apple had to adapt. USB-C didn't just replace Lightning, it unified an entire ecosystem that had become fragmented over time. And in the end, that's what happened to Lightning. It didn't fail. It simply got replaced by something the world had already moved on to. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.